Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Outsiders.
I'm Todd Pickering,
I'm Seth Austin.
and we're a couple of actors stuck on the outside, trying to make our way to the inside of the biz.
Hollywood, baby.
Yes, tis.
Oh man, we're getting
Tis.
better at that, Todd. We got to give ourselves a little pat on the back.
It's the coffee.
It's the nothing to do with us. Just drink the right coffee, folks.
The personality is coffee.
Can't be an actor in Hollywood without a good cup of coffee.
I'm a walking meme, apparently. It's what I am.
So, speaking of memes, which have nothing to do with reopening, let's talk about reopening, or I guess the lack thereof. No,
You're talking about the nation and specifically Hollywood, baby, specifically California?
Yeah, I don't want to brag here, Todd, but I have said to my wife several times in the last, I guess 2 weeks that I don't think that this reopening is really going to happen. And and it doesn't look like this reopening is really going to happen at this point.
It's happening. It's just fits and spurts. Is that the expression?
Fits and start. I would have
Starts and fits.
Something like
there you
that.
Go. Email us and tell us what it is.
Tell us the right answer to that. That's fantastic.
What's the email address?
What is the email? That is a brilliant segue, Todd. Look at you. And Todd had said he had too much wine last night, and I don't believe it. He's sharp as a tack. So the email address is theoutsidersbiz, that's B-I-Z, at gmail.com. Repeat that for them, Todd.
What? Repeat it? Theoutsidersbiz at gmail.com. Biz with a Z, like Liza with a Z.
Just like Liza with a Z. Just like that.
I think it's fits and starts. I'm pretty sure now that
fits and starts. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
It doesn't sound right.
It doesn't. Well, it's. I mean,
we're
actually,
gonna change it. Fits and spurts.
Fits and spurts. But when you said it again, there, it actually, honestly, it did sound right to me because it settled down in my brain.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It just, but
yeah. So Disneyland is not reopening as it was supposed to.
But that's again, if you want to talk professional, there's a lot of unions at Disneyland. I mean, I think there's a custodial union or a food service, but there's definitely, AGVA is the performers union, and there's musicians unions. So it's not really a question of it's still going to open. It's just, it didn't meet guidelines. It's not going to open on the date that they said. There's just too many moving parts of a giant theme park.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there's so much risk to be had there, and I mean, it's said indefinitely, right? It's said indefinitely, but I guess they're just not going to set a date lest they have to then push it back again. That's actually super smart of them to do that. And okay, what else is reopening? My acting school is actually reopening, Playhouse West, on July 17th. Now, they are being very, 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 very strict with how they are reopening. And I think that is a great thing. For instance, if you have traveled, you will have to wait 2 weeks before returning to school after you come back to Los Angeles. You have to wear a mask, of course, for the whole time.
So you have to perform with a mask on?
Great question, Todd. Yes, you have to do your exercises, everything with a mask on. And not only that, you have to stay 6 feet distant even during the exercise.
Well, sure, that makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me, not the studio. I mean, my studio, Graham Shields' studio, is also opening, and I work there. So, I mean, I will be back to work. And again, the guidelines are changing. So businesses have to follow the guidelines, but I find it problematic to do a scene with a mask on. You're not really acting. I don't think we're going to have TV series with people wearing masks.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because a lot of, especially the Meisner training, and a lot of training relies on you looking at the person, seeing how they're feeling and reacting to that like humans do, right? So having a mask on cuts out your ability to do that.
Right. And let me get this straight. Again, we're following the guidelines also, but we're not doing any 2-person scenes. They're only doing on-camera scenes because of the current.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
we
that's
don't want to be the
interesting.
6 feet.
Yeah, of
It's pretty
course.
hard to do, I was gonna say, guess who's coming to dinner? Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Mm-hmm.
With George and Martha 6 feet apart, screaming at each other. And even then, it's still dangerous because you're screaming at each other.
Yeah, even with a mask on, and then
Well, with the mask on, it's okay.
it
But my
makes it a lot
point just is
better.
we're just
Yeah.
doing single scenes because of that very reason.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. It's just, there's our hands are tied, and we just have to, I guess, deal with it. And, so the Playhouse West, I'm doing doors and activities pretty much every single class, which I'll get deeper into what doors and activities are at another time. But it's the classic like Meisner exercise. So if you got two people up there and, the whole point is to kind of look at the other person, take them in, and then react to what they're giving you. And now I think I've talked about this with other Playhouse West students, like having the mask on for a couple of goes at that exercise would actually be kind of a fun exercise in and of itself, I think. That said, after a few times, I don't know that is going to stay that way. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe after a while, people will just get used to it and it'll just become the new norm. And, maybe you'll just have to get even better at reading the person, even though they have the mask on.
Well, I think we're going out of order here, but that's just such a great segue. No, we'll stay in order.
Okay, it's
because
fine.
we'll book in that. But masks, masks is the acting topic of the day. We seem to have a theme is masks.
Yeah, this wasn't what we even talked about, but I like it. I think it's, masks are an integral part. If you're just listening, Todd is being ridiculous right now. He's trying to make me laugh. He's trying to make me be unprofessional.
No, you're just unprofessional.
Oh my God, Todd. Are we having our first on podcast fight right now?
We're having a spat.
This is what our Saturday morning has come to. We're recording on Saturday morning, by the way.
I just love the makeup podcasts.
The makeup. Oh, I was like makeup. Like, are we gonna do like a Maybelline commercial? Oh, you mean like after a fight cup podcast? No, I'm totally flustered. Back to Playhouse West. So, they are taking these restrictions, I think, are all absolutely necessary, and I understand why they're doing them. That said, I have plans to go visit my 72-year-old mother in mid-August. We're doing like a little family vacation thing. And despite all of these restrictions, I can't rationalize going back to class for the 3 weeks before I'm visiting my mom to expose myself in that way and then go visit her and potentially get her sick. And her being older, of course, that carries greater risk. So I am going to sit out of class until I get back from the vacation. And then I will, if we're still doing masks at that point, I'll report back on what that experience is like. And I look forward to hearing what Todd's experience is like in class with masks on. Okay, so last time I mentioned that I was going to watch a virtual play.
How was that?
So it was at the Geffen Playhouse, put on this streaming or teleconference venue play. We did it on Zoom, like everything else is these days, like this is. And maybe I didn't do enough research beforehand, or maybe I just didn't read between the lines. But so this play actually turned out to be a magic show, which when I first heard that, when my friend told me that, like I saw, like he opened the box and there was like a deck of cards in there. I was a little disappointed. I was like, oh, it's not going to be like a play. But then like very quickly I realized that, of course, magic is the ultimate theatrical, like one-man show, if you will. It's essentially what it is, right? Or, two-person show if it's Penn and Teller or if there's assistants. But this was 100% a one-man show. And this gentleman had a Brazilian Portuguese accent, and very interesting. The story he told to go along with this brilliant magic show he did was extremely touching. It was about him being in a forced quarantine from an injury when he was young. He stayed in quarantine, just by default for quite a large part of his youth with his grandfather. And so it was a story about him and his grandfather, essentially. And he wove all of the magic into, this story that dealt with his grandfather. And so it was
Well, that's
extremely
interesting
touching.
then, because that makes it more, I mean, you know, you just made magic is theater. And I'm like, yeah, is it?
Yeah,
That's debatable. But it's like,
right.
wait, you know, like I, I do know magicians that this does sound like a one-man show with magic.
That's exactly what it was. And I guess maybe the qualifier there is that maybe the magic shows I enjoy the most employ that kind of element where there's a story and a lot of theater to go along with it. Um, because when you're watching magic, like, let's just be honest, right? A lot of it you can kind of figure, even if you don't know exactly how they do it, you kind of do, right? You can be like, okay, they kind of forced this choice. But the thing is, that doesn't take anything away from it, especially when you have this other theatrical element of a very personal story being told along with it and having all the tricks relate to that story. Because the fact of the matter is, even if you know how they're doing these things, they're extremely hard to do and pull off in the moment, especially with all these other elements thrown on top of them.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about someone who's been doing this for 30 years, and so he is just a master at what he's doing. He's not doing any actual magic, of course. Magic is a series of sleight of hands and manipulations and pushing people towards choices and stuff like that. But that doesn't make it easy to pull off seamlessly like this gentleman did, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway,
So you
I
liked
can't
it.
say I really enjoyed it. And, I one of the things I enjoyed about it the most was that at the very beginning, there was like a virtual waiting room, and when you sign on, there's a very talented stage manager who I wouldn't be surprised to learn is also an actor. He looked very familiar. His name was Adam something. And so as
Or
soon as you sign,
possibly the
what's
stage
that?
manager is an actor, maybe. It's not really
Yeah,
a stage manager.
what's that?
I mean, maybe it was an actor playing a stage manager.
It wouldn't surprise me, but he was just very good at what he did. As soon as you came in, he was super friendly and he welcomed you, and then he put you in the virtual waiting room, and he just constantly giving all the instructions and stuff, and it gave the feeling of being in a virtual waiting room. And there was like a real sense of community too within
Interesting.
the people watching. You could kind of feel it, like even though we were all separated by a lot of space, you definitely got the feeling that you were in this show with the other 25 households, pardon me,
Cool.
that were part of it. Yeah. So, I mean, I can't say enough about it. Just be prepared. It is a magic show. And I do hope that, more venues like the Geffen kind of take up the reins and come up with new and creative ways of putting on theatrical performances, while we're in this weirdo lockdown.
Again, I mean, let's not make a show about doom and gloom, or let's not talk about, the future, because we can't tell it. And we're just, what do we know? What the hell do we know? We're just stupid actors. But, like when you said you called it, you just don't open. And certainly places like you mentioned, Disneyland and theaters and sporting events, they're not going to open.
The concerts are the highest risk. Yeah.
They're closing the bars in Florida and Texas. Florida for sure. Don't quote me.
Definitely Texas.
Things change every
Texas
moment.
too. Texas is even more intense. Texas is saying that the governor said directly that like the bars are with the cause of the spikes. I mean, which makes sense, right? So the bar that I went to in LA a week ago or so, it is a bar, but it didn't reopen like a bar. You couldn't sit at the bar. You still had to keep your distance from everyone and wear your mask 100% of the time. And you had to order food. They have to have food, and you have to order food if you're going to sit there. They don't want people just getting drunk and being rowdy and being like typically at a bar, which
they can't stay open if you don't order food as part of your financial, because they don't want people to get drunk because of what's going on.
Exactly.
So that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I think it's a good thing, but I suspect, and I haven't looked at this, but I suspect that in places like Texas, they're not being quite as strict with that kind of stuff. And maybe
there was a bar in Florida where the entire staff, like nobody had a mask on, and it was packed. So, I mean, the 16 girls that I saw being interviewed, all 16 of them got it. But it's a milder case. I mean, look, this is who knows what's going to happen. Let's just be careful. Hollywood's reopening, but when you say Hollywood's reopening, it doesn't mean they're going to start shooting next week.
No.
And they're probably, every studio, every place is going to try a show, try a movie. I mean, everything's a learning curve.
I mean,
And
everything's going to have to be small, right? You're not going to be able to have large crews working intimately like they used to,
well, but as things change, they'll be more and more able to. So we'll see.
Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully. We'll see. Okay, so also last week we went deep into my college freshman year. And so this week I would like to talk to Todd about his college experience and his freshman year. So
Well,
Todd.
and we talked about we want education's important. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about going to college, I know these times are weird. And we're just talking about studios not open. But I mean, all things shall pass. But
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's not still a valuable story.
yeah, and when you're young, it's sometimes it's a bit much to go out of high school and move to LA or New York. Those places can eat you up.
Sounds
So
intimidating. Sounds
yeah,
very
so
intimidating to just
going
up
to
and move.
college was awesome because you have Seth said this, and I've agreed wholeheartedly. It gives you the opportunity to learn and to fail.
Yep.
Without any repercussions.
Yeah, the weight of the world is not on your shoulders. You don't have to worry about holding down a side job. You don't have to worry about paying bills. You know what I mean? And so it's easy to, or for me anyway, in college, it was great because I had this sort of just lightness of being.
Well, there are famous actors that have been fired from movies because they don't gel with the director, and these are movies. I mean, so once you're in the professional world, you have to deliver 100%.
Right.
You're there to deliver. We didn't have a Fresh Faces program like Seth did, which was great. Where they had a
new faces. Todd,
new faces. Well, your face is so fresh that
fresh face.
Yeah, don't get flattered. Today I'm Ms. Malaprop. Mrs. Malaprop.
I don't remember.
What plays that from? Sheridan.
I know what you're talking about. The reference is going over my head a little bit now.
She spoke in mispronounced word, like
yeah.
I hear that woman's a Lebanese instead of a lesbian. That's a malapropism. The character's
Lebanese
name.
Lesbian was the name of my band in high school.
Really?
No.
Oh, I believe you. Let's start a band now. Lebanese lesbians, all male.
Oh, of course. It was
no people of color. we will last.
Hypocritical on so many levels.
Yeah, I'm just saying. And that was
ironic,
I guess. Short-lived band. What were we talking about?
I have no idea. God, Todd.
Freshman year. I went to the University of Nebraska, which I don't know what it looks like now. There was a grad program, there was a master's program, and large-ish program. But we had to audition for all. We had a main stage, 4 shows a year.
Okay.
And we had a studio theater.
So a black box.
A black box.
Yeah.
So you could make the audience in all 3 sides, in the circle, in the round, theater in the round.
Yeah.
Or you could do a thrust stage where the audience was just on 3 parts and you kind of had a false proscenium.
And how many seats were in your black box, roughly? Was it small? Was it large? Was
150, 200?
150, 200. So, okay. So it was like medium
50
size.
in each section.
Yeah. So medium size for in the round.
So almost all the shows were done in the round. Most of the shows were done in the round because you could have more audience members, but it was an educational thing,
Sure.
So, every other year we did a Christmas Carol.
Oh yeah. That was like your thing in the fall or in the winter.
Every other year we did a Christmas Carol that paid for the entire, it sold out. The entire city of Lincoln would come see a Christmas Carol. Our theater was the oldest building on campus, so it wasn't huge. I think it sat 500 and something. So shortly after I graduated, they built a performing arts. So they started doing a Christmas Carol for like a week and sat thousands and thousands of people. And, Les Mis could come to town now and that kind of stuff. So they fixed the problem. But when I was in college, they did it every other year so as not to drive the students crazy, I guess. So my freshman year was a Christmas Carol. And my whole thing was, as a theater major, I just want to be a Fezziwig party guest so I can be cast my freshman year. Like, it was hard to get cast. So you just wanted to be a Fezziwig party guest. And there were 3 theater majors, be it Bachelor of Fine Arts. And the gal got cast and the men did not. And I thought I was a huge loser. I didn't get cast at all my freshman year.
That's tough.
No, my freshman first semester. So my second semester, they did in the round Christopher Durang's Beyond Therapy, and I wanted to get in that so bad, and I got in it. So
who'd you play?
Bob.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about you playing Bob.
Oh yeah, that's interesting because I just graduated from high school. Do you know that play?
A little bit. I think I read it in college, but I don't remember it particularly well.
Talk about dated. It's about a guy that takes out an ad in the personals. That's, so online dating back then would be in the newspaper.
Uh-huh.
And he meets a gal, and he immediately, the date that it's going well. So he says, I want to marry you. I want to move to Connecticut.
Yeah.
And my male lover can live above the garage and we'll have a wonderful life. But she's like, wait, excuse me. Can you excuse me? Your male lover? He goes, oh yeah, I'm bisexual. I didn't tell you that. Bob is my lover. I live with him and he'll really like you. And then the date goes terrible and they go back to their therapists.
Oh.
And she's been sleeping with her therapist and his therapist is insane. And then he has a date and I played the male lover, Bob, but it's got every filthy word in the book. I mean, yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, so I had to, for my whole family, it was like, I'm not playing the dad with spray painted silver hair in a high school play anymore because I'm 6'2".
Yeah, it's like, that's interesting, right? Having your parents come to the first thing you do in college.
There was no segue into, it's just, here we go.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I wasn't in this play, but they did How I Learned to Drive was the very first show when I was a freshman, and I watched it with my mom. So it was kind of a similar experience. I mean, and granted I wasn't in it, but having to watch something that heavy, and my mom is cool. My mom is pretty down to earth when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it wasn't a big deal. And man, I loved that play. And that was one of the other things that made me really want to get into that theater department was that production. But yeah. So what was that? What was your parents? What did they say after they saw this show?
Well, see, I was worried about my grandparents. Uh-huh. So I said to my grandmother Elsie, she was 4'10".
Of course she was.
Spitfire. And she was an avid reader. She read 2 or 3 books a week. So I didn't think she should come to the play. And I said, well, I got cast in the play, and she, we cannot wait to see the show. And I said,
you're not keeping Grandma away. You're not keeping 4'10" Grandma Elsa away.
Yeah. So I said, that's what I said. Well, I need to tell you something about the play. And she said, sure. I said, it's a very adult play. And she said, she was really pissed off. She said, so are you trying to infer that I am not an adult? I said, no, it's just, I said, so she read the play. I said, here, why don't you read the play after Sunday dinner? And she sat in the corner with her, and she read it. Oh, oh no.
For those of you not watching, Todd is playing his grandmother right now. Quite virtuoso.
Yeah. So she just chuckled the whole time, and she goes, I said, well, what'd you think? And she said, well, Todd, people talk like that.
That is such a such a compliment to the playwright and so astute. I mean, you're talking about a woman who read all the time, and she sounds like she was sharp as a tack. That's a great story.
That's what I blew, though, because it was my mom that had the problem with it, not my, in the sense that it's your kid.
Right.
I was so stressed about my grandma and her sister. So I had 2 grandmas, my Aunt Pearl. And we found that there is a great line in the play at the end where they all end up going to, it's a farce. It's ridiculous. But the woman kind of loses her shit. And she just says, and she's holding the waiter at knife point because, it's a joke, but she's just like, do you all know the song, Someday My Prince Will Come? Well, it's shit. There is no prince. And the elderly people would applaud that line.
Right. And
because we're the University of Nebraska, which is a very Republican state, the university is very liberal, but the state's not very liberal at all. We had people walk out right and left of that show.
That's interesting because it was how old was that show when it was produced, when you guys produced it?
It was relatively new.
Okay. Yeah. So it was kind of cutting edge for the time. And so
it's just, the theater's always pushed limits. I mean, even 100 years ago, it's just that, for somebody that had never seen a play,
right.
And, television at that point, there was HBO, But if you live in rural Nebraska, nowhere near a cinema, you're not going to be seeing art house movies or
Right.
filthy, you know.
Yeah.
So there was a fair amount of people. I mean, not a lot, but people were really, of course, offended. But
I think that that's a great compliment, and that shows how Durang really was on the edge of things. And I mean, he upset some people, but that's what great art does, in my humble opinion.
But it's hilarious too, so it makes it it definitely makes it easier to deal with.
Yeah. I love that your grandmother was totally okay with it, but it was your mom. Like all those ironies, like it's just.
So my mom went twice because she did really like the show. I mean, she just had to be prepared for it. It was just difficult for her. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And she went with two of her high school friends, and she sat in the middle of them. And one was kind of right-wing and conservative, and more conservative just as a human being, not the stupid political labels, because we're all conservative and we're all liberal. You can't be a human being and not be.
Yeah, we're all of the things. Yeah,
we've distorted those words to make them part of parties. That's a big soapbox thing of mine, and I just said it. But my mom's other friend had been divorced a couple times, and throughout the whole play, she kept leaning into my mom so Karen could hear go, "Oh my Lord, this is my life. This is my life." And my mom kept saying, "Would you shut up?" Because it's an intimate theater, and people were turning around to look at this woman and go, "Who's had a life like this?"
Well, I mean, Durang wrote it for a reason, right? I mean, there's people out there that have lives like that.
So during intermission, my mom's friend to her right pretended not to know them. My mom went to talk to her. She goes, "I don't know you. I'm pretending like I don't know you two. I'm leaving this theater alone. I'll have a drink with you, but I'm not."
That is so funny. I mean, that's great though. That's one of the other great things about theater we always talk about is like this friend of your mom's was experiencing this thing in the moment, directly relating to it, and then sharing it, sharing with the people that she was there with, and there's something really beautiful about that. I mean, it can be a bit much if you're being disruptive to the performance, of course. You don't want to,
of course,
you want to be respectful to what's happening on stage, but
yeah, I mean, which is funny. And it was a great production, really good actors in it, all really good people. And I just, we posted on our Instagram. Follow us on Instagram. Look at that for a segue, because it just kind of like about acting. Peter Hall, created the Royal Shakespeare Company, said, "A bad film irritates or provokes the giggles. A bad performance with live actors embarrasses and appalls."
Yeah.
No, but saying like bad acting's bad acting, but there's a different experience. I thought of it too about how the experience is. I mean, he's just saying bad acting's bad acting.
Right.
Irritates or provokes the giggles. It's easier to laugh at somebody when they're on the silver screen and they're safely at their home,
right?
Years later, months later, after this film's come out, or long dead, if you will. Easy to giggle at somebody that's passed away. But when you see a live performance, it's embarrassing because, you can touch them and you can feel the room. But it was a really good production. It was, it was the guy's thesis show. So,
oh yeah, that's great.
You can go back a couple years later and you can read why you were cast in your role, because that's part of their thesis.
Oh, that's cool. You can do that. What, like you said, a couple of years later? You don't get to read that until later.
You have to write a thesis if you get a master's degree. So
yeah, no, but I mean,
you can go to, if you all want out there, all of our listeners, you can go to the University of Nebraska Love Library on campus, and you can check out Tim Mooney's thesis on Beyond Therapy
and why Todd got cast in that role.
You can see
that's actually really cool. We didn't have anything like that at my school. That's really awesome.
I did. Well, almost every show I did was a thesis show, because we had a master's program. So there was costume design thesis. I was in, a show that was a costume design thesis. So
right.
I tell you again, a few weeks ago we talked about graduating from college and being in a show in the East Village or something on off Broadway, going, "Oh my God, this theater's going to fall in on us." And yet, yet you're in college. Not only are you in a show with really nice costumes, this is this woman's thesis. So you bet everything's made for scratch. You're not pulling costumes from a downtown costume rental shop. You're making a dress from 1910 to fit your body perfectly. And I mean, talk about being in character, how magical it is to wear something that's been created for you.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's an experience that you may never get again as an actor, you know?
Well, unless you get onto Broadway and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
Broadway. So how many students were in your theater department? Like how many majors, minors, and all that roughly? Do you remember?
Wow. BFAs, we had a big class of 3 for BFA acting, but there were some BFAs in scene design.
Okay.
There were about 6 directors, MFA, and about, I guess there were about 3 every year MFAs. So they
Gotcha.
overlapped each other.
Yeah. And then
approximately.
And then,
so,
like, what about the actual theater department? Like, what you were doing as an undergraduate? How many people were? How many
there were lots
students?
of BAs, and then there were, of course, students that were getting an English and theater degree to teach high school, a teaching degree. So, I mean, I'd say there were 50 people in the theater department actually getting a major of some sort between a minor in theater, or so like your scene design class was extremely important to a theater, to an education major. Right. So even though we wanted to be actors and everything, he kind of sloughed us off in scene design class. But he would say to these teaching majors, you need to get an A+ in this, because you could get a job in a department where, you're going to have to build a set. You're going to be in charge of building a set in these small. I mean, I don't know where he says, I don't know where you're going. I don't know if you're going to performing arts high school where you actually might have a scenic designer, but bully for you. Good luck with getting that job. You better be exceptional in what you do. But if you go to a small town in Nebraska, luckily you'll have probably smaller towns have more scene shop, people that are good with a hammer and building a set. But
right. That's interesting. It sounds like it was professional. You had BFAs, you had all that stuff. So it was a mixed program. Like mine was just undergraduate, and a lot of that sort of designing for people and was done by our professors, and then the students of course would help build it. And certain students that really enjoyed that kind of thing would get more concentrated doing that stuff, but we didn't have those kinds of intensive like BFA type things and then MFA.
The other thing is, the University of Nebraska, there is no state school. University of Kansas, Kansas State, University of Iowa, Iowa State, University of Colorado, Colorado State. Nebraska only had the University of Nebraska, and it's not a huge state, so it made sense. So it was a big campus. Yeah. And we had Theater 112 was an academic class taught by mostly grad students. Mm-hmm. I mean, mostly doctorates. The doctorates taught all of those classes, so they filled them up. But some directors had to teach them to fill up the slots. And then Theater 114 was acting. And that's what you take your freshman year. It's just a 1 semester. I don't remember. But so those filled the requirements for your fine arts requirement if you were going to be a doctor, if you were going to be whatever. So our sets were built, the scenic design. So when you were in 112, you had to work 20 hours behind. That was part of your homework. So there was 100 people building sets. Oh, wow. Our sets were fantastic.
That's nuts. You had 100 people building your sets?
Yeah, because there were about 10 different classes with about 30 kids. I mean, hundreds. They could also do lighting. They could also do a lot of the women that especially would work in the costume shop. Wow. But you had to do 20 hours to take. And of course, theater majors had to take 112 and 114 because they were the intro to theater, intro to acting. That's what they were called.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But that was for the entire university to fulfill a fine arts to graduate from any degree. You have to take X amount of English, X amount of
gen ed
language.
Yeah. General education requirements.
So so our scene shop was huge.
Yeah. It sounds like it had to have been if you had 100 people working on it. I mean, we had an incredible scene shop, but it would never fit 100 people to work on it.
But there's 4 shows. So.
Oh, I see. So 4 shows, you have to do 100 or 20 hours somewhere in those 4 shows.
I said, the main stage would have more people sign up. You'd have to sign up. Not everybody could sign. And if there's a show in the round, they only maybe needed 5 people to work on the set with them.
Right. Because it was,
like the day they're painting the stage, they would just, they would assign you. You'd show up and the head of the scene department would go, all right, 20 people need to go upstairs and paint the floor, and then you're done. That set's done. That's cool. Like I was a theater major and he goes, we need you to take a staple gun and staple a rug into the floor. And because me and another theater major weren't very good with the staple gun, we came back down and goes, all right, got another project for you. We're like, yeah, we need more staples. Because It was full. And I said, well, it took us half the rug to figure it out.
I mean, I remember I had so many stories like that from Scene Shop where like, yeah, the master carpenter would be like, yeah, go do this. And like, I would come back like, I did it. And, it took a while. It would take me 2-3 times as long as it should have in the beginning to do certain things. And I would screw it up. And he would always be like, and he was super patient most of the time. He'd be like, see, this is how you should have done it. And, and then I would learn and it was fine. And most of the time, you're seeing these things from such a distance that a crooked cut of a piece of plywood doesn't on the bottom of a set piece that's going to be spinning, you're never going to notice it, but
well, there's a famous story of a girl that like Ed, the head of the scene shop, comes down and she's painting a chair. And they're like, he goes, what the hell's that for? Shh. She just keeps ruining things. So we just gave her a chair to paint. We just brought it from upstairs. She's painting it a different color. Yeah. She's almost done. We're going to actually give her 5 hours instead of 2, just so she could be done. We need her out of the scene shop. She's causing more trouble, because that was the other problem too. There were some people that were so klutzy.
Yeah.
That they're
my friend Mike, who ended up being the master carpenter eventually, one of the first things he did was he took a screw gun, a drill, and he successfully drilled in like two screws with the drill going the wrong way, like he had it in the reverse direction, but he was just putting so much pressure on it that he was actually able to push a screw in, despite the fact that he had this drill rotating the wrong way the whole time. He's like, I don't know
why this is so hard.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's the learning curve.
It's quite a learning curve, but him and I were co-master carpenters our senior years. So obviously, he came a long way.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
So what are our tips?
So I actually thought of another one while we were talking about your stories about your parents coming, your mom coming, and your grandmother coming. And it was a thing I had read in one of my basics of acting books back in college, and the sort of need to be ready and deal with how your friends but especially family might react to what you are doing as an actor. They may not be ready for it, and it may make you sort of self-conscious. So if you're a younger actor who's sort of just getting into this, just kind of make that deal with yourself, that maybe at first, at least, you may have to think twice about doing a particular role, or maybe you won't, but just be prepared for whatever may come of that from your family, especially, and potentially friends. I think that the tip that they gave in this acting book that I read said that, it's okay to turn down a role or a project because that your family is not going to be okay with it. And I don't disagree with that. Like if that's something you feel like you have to do to keep the peace with your family, then I guess that there's nothing wrong with it.
I guess, but definitely don't take a role that you are unable to play. Right. With your comfort level.
Right. That's the most important thing, right? I think that's a very good point, Todd. I think if you yourself are comfortable with it, I think that try to push the envelope. My personal recommendation is to try to push the envelope, and your family will, I think, come along for the ride eventually. Maybe not at first, but they will eventually. And so
it's okay not to invite your family, or to just let them know, hey, this you might be uncomfortable during the show. So it's your choice. And you might even say, I don't know if I don't think you'd enjoy this show. So you don't need to come. And, come at your own risk. You should be honest. I'm going to be nude. I'm going to be doing this.
Yeah, prepare them.
Just like I did with my grandmother. Here's a very serious story, but this is a perfect example of what you said. And this is an agent friend of mine. They sent one of their actors out an audition, and the casting director said, your actor is in the other room. You probably should call her. She broke down and can't stop crying.
Whoa.
She was reading for a woman that had had a miscarriage. And she had a month earlier had a miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And he called her and said, what's going on? Are you okay? I don't care about the audition. How are you? And she told him, I should have called. He said, you should not have gone out for this audition. she said, I didn't want to turn down an audition. I didn't want you to think. It's like, no, we need to know this.
Yeah. That's a good agent.
And I don't,
that's a good agent right there.
Well, you can't, as an actor, you have to make sure you're removed from Paula Vogel's play, How I Learned to Drive. You have to choose if you're able to do a show like that.
Right. Right.
Even Beyond Therapy, that's a comedy. Maybe you're not comfortable with the subject matter. You're never going to create comedy. I mean, you have to be relaxed to do comedy. Wow, we've pulled this all in, haven't we?
That was great. I'm glad that this all came out of that.
We're good.
Yeah, I think, I think that really touched on what I've had heard before. And I knew that we were going to bring this up at some point, but yeah, sometimes you're just, like Gwyneth Paltrow, when she was in Proof, and I forget the character's name, but when she played the lead role in Proof,
yeah.
She herself, she was not considered very good in that role. And I would kind of tend to agree, but of course these things are subjective. And the reason being that her own father had died not that long before she was in that film, playing a character where her father dies in the course of the film or in the play. And so the rule kind of, or the idea says that like you probably shouldn't play a role that the thing that happens, you're too close to it.
Correct.
For a lot of reasons, maybe it's not going to necessarily impact your psyche, but it might be hard for you to fully inhabit that that thing and live that truth if you're too close to it, and I don't know exactly the psychological mechanisms behind it, but it makes sense to me if I think about it, because I think you do have to sort of, you need a healthy distance from that. It's it's going to certainly, when you do have that healthy distance, your experience is going to help you play that, it's going to, because what that's like.
Yep.
But I do think that healthy distance is necessary.
All right. I think we should wrap it up. I mean,
yeah.
There's so much more we're going to talk about, but I think that's just a great way to land and think about something.
Yeah.
Deep contemplative ending.
Deep contemplative ending. Keep checking Deadline for, all the reopening news. That's something I just learned this week. And have a great week.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Be safe.
Very safe.
Bye. Bye-bye.